Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the unpredictable, sometimes hilarious, and always gritty daily life of our prehistoric ancestors. But not the stone-smashing, fire-discovering cliches you might expect. What did humans really do all day before smartwatches, coffee runs, and endless doom-scrolling? You're about to find out. So before we start, if you love these deep dives into history with a touch of humor and a lot of real talk, hit that subscribe button. But only if you truly enjoy this kind of content. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what's the weather like over there? It's incredible to see this community growing from all over the planet, past and present colliding right here. Dim the lights, settle in, maybe grab a drink, and let's journey back thousands of years where survival wasn't an app away, and spoiler alert, nobody skipped breakfast on purpose. Long before alarms buzzed or notifications jolted people awake, the typical prehistoric human's morning began with something much simpler. The sun creeping over the horizon, and the chill in the air sneaking under every layer of fur and hide you had. Imagine this. It's early spring, the trees are barely starting to show signs of green, the ground still wet and cold from the night before, and somewhere nearby, the faint crackling of embers struggling to survive the wind. You wake up stiff, possibly damp, and immediately your mind switches into survival mode. There's no snooze button here. Every sound matters. Most people didn't have individual sleeping spaces. Privacy was an abstract concept. You slept shoulder to shoulder with relatives, neighbors, allies, sometimes even that one guy nobody really liked but who was good with his hands, so he got to stay. The ground was your mattress. Packed earth with a thin layer of leaves, maybe some moss if you were lucky enough to camp near a good patch. Furs from last winter's hunt covered your group like a patchwork quilt of survival, and the faint, smoky smell of last night's fire clung to everything. The first task? The fire check. Fire was life, literally. If those embers had gone out overnight, someone was in for a frustrating, finger-blistering morning of trying to coax flames back to life using friction tools made from dry sticks, animal sinew, and sheer stubbornness. It wasn't just warmth at stake. Without fire, cooking food became nearly impossible. Predators crept closer, and even insects seemed to sense your vulnerability. Assuming the fire was alive, flickering weakly, the next step was tool inspection. Every family, every group, had their arsenal. Handcrafted blades, scrapers, spears, slings, and woven baskets made from twisted reeds. Tools weren't optional. They were the extension of your body, your insurance policy against hunger, injury, and exposure. Some folks had a natural gift for crafting, the kind of person who could sharpen a stone into a razor-edged blade that sliced through sinew like warm butter. Others? Well, they'd be the ones borrowing better gear, with the unspoken agreement that favors come with strings attached. By now, the youngest members of the group stirred first. Children, barefoot and wild-haired, poked at the fading coals or fumbled with leftover food scraps, their curiosity far outweighing their caution. It wasn't uncommon for a little one to nearly trip into the fire or tug at the frayed edge of a spear, a chaotic yet strangely organized morning routine. Adults followed, groaning as stiff joints protested movement. The morning checklist was unchanging. Evaluate the surroundings for threats, check traps set overnight, inspect water sources, and plan the day's priorities. The luxury of easing into the day, it simply didn't exist. From the moment your eyes opened, it was a delicate dance of staying warm, finding nourishment, and keeping your body in one piece. Hygiene, as we define it today, was an afterthought. There were no soap bars, no hot showers, no breath mints tucked into hides. Cleanliness was functional. You scrubbed off grime when it interfered with movement or attracted unwanted attention. Bathing meant finding a stream, provided the water wasn't glacially cold, and even then, many opted for quick splashes rather than full immersions. In harsher climates or during colder months, sand or coarse grasses replaced water for scrubbing down. It wasn't glamorous, but it reduced infections and the ever-present itch of parasites. One unconventional, surprisingly effective method: animal fat. Smearing rendered fat onto exposed skin wasn't just for insulation, it warded off bugs and formed a primitive barrier against the elements. Imagine glistening under the weak morning sun, coated in a layer of greasy protection. Strange by modern standards, essential back then. Teeth care followed similar logic. With no processed sugars, cavities were rarer than injuries. But that didn't mean oral health was perfect. People chewed on fibrous roots or smooth sticks to clean their teeth, scraping away leftover sinew from meals or grit embedded in tough plants. Dental wear was common, exacerbated by the tiny particles of stone that inevitably made their way into meals thanks to grinding grains between rocks. Hair was rarely a concern. Long, often tangled, tied back with strips of leather or ignored entirely, it served as insulation more than decoration. Lice were a reality, dealt with through ash, mud, or simply persistent scratching. Some communities eventually crafted crude combs from bone or wood, a small but meaningful step toward grooming standards that would one day evolve into salons and shampoo commercials. Clothing, purely utilitarian. Animal hides formed the base layer, stitched together with sinew, draped over shoulders, wrapped around feet, tied at the waist. There was little variation in style. Everyone wore some combination of fur, leather, and dirt. Foot coverings ranged from hide wraps to more constructed moccasins, depending on skill and available materials. But make no mistake, the prehistoric wardrobe was about survival, not fashion statements. The environment dictated everything. Morning temperatures hovered near freezing in many regions, even in spring. That constant bite of cold motivated the group to move, to forage, to hunt, to prepare, all before the sun had climbed much higher in the sky. Breakfast, if you were fortunate, came from last night's hunt. A strip of dried meat, marrow scooped from a cracked bone, maybe a handful of preserved berries tucked away in a woven pouch. But more often, the morning meal meant foraging. Roots dug from the earth, wild greens scavenged from the forest edge, small fruits or nuts hidden beneath the underbrush. Protein sources were unpredictable. Small animals, birds, reptiles, rodents, offered quick calories but required stealth and patience to catch. Insects filled the nutritional gaps. Crunchy beetles, fat grubs, writhing worms. It wasn't about preference, it was survival. Termite mounds were treasure troves, their contents roasted lightly over the rekindled fire for a protein-rich if unappealing breakfast. Water was fetched early. Streams and shallow pools were ideal, but in dry regions, morning dew collected on leaves or the muddy remnants of yesterday's rain became essential. The risk? Consuming unboiled water came with bacteria, parasites, illness. But hydration couldn't wait for perfection. Your immune system either kept pace or you didn't. By now, the group's tasks diverged. Some remained behind to maintain camp, mending clothing, sharpening tools, reinforcing shelters. Others scouted the surroundings, mapping animal movement, checking for danger, planning the day's hunt or forage routes. Every step outside camp meant exposure to risk, predators, rival groups, harsh terrain. But staying still wasn't an option. Children, meanwhile, absorbed their surroundings like sponges. No formal education existed. Instead, they learned through watching, mimicking, stumbling. Playing with sticks became spear practice. Chasing each other around camp honed agility needed for escaping real threats later. Discipline was immediate, often physical, grabbed by the arm, barked at in frustration, but rooted in necessity. Hunger was a constant companion. Even with a successful morning forage or leftover scraps, bellies rumbled. Energy needed replenishing fast because the biggest challenge of the day loomed: the hunt. And hunting wasn't a solitary pursuit. It was an orchestrated, high-stakes performance where every participant, from the most seasoned tracker to the newest adolescent with a spear, had a role to play. But that story, the thrill, the failure, the strategy of the prehistoric hunt, we'll dive into that in the next block. Once the faint warmth of the morning sun touched the treetops and the smell of smoke drifted lazily from the camp, the group prepared for the centerpiece of their daily survival ritual: the hunt. Hunting wasn't just about filling stomachs. It was about proving skill, building status, and ensuring the entire group made it through another day without succumbing to hunger or losing members to miscalculated risks. The hunting team wasn't made up of lone warriors silently stalking prey. It was a coordinated ensemble, More like a moving, breathing puzzle where every individual, regardless of their age or skill, had their place. Elders with sharp eyes who could read the ground like a map led the initial scouting, tracing the faint imprints of hooves or claws through mud, grass, or scattered leaves. Young adults, nimble and eager, followed with spears crafted from wood and sharpened stone, their nervous energy vibrating just beneath their steady exteriors. Targets varied with region and season. In fertile plains, herds of shaggy herbivores, massive aurochs, wild boars, and reindeer with antlers sprawling like tangled branches roamed the open fields. In forested regions, prey was more elusive: fleet-footed deer, clever hares, and the occasional unsuspecting wildfowl. But every hunter dreamed of the monumental score, a creature so large, so packed with fat, muscle, and hide, that its successful harvest could sustain the group for weeks. Enormous woolly rhinoceroses trudged through colder regions. Musk oxen and ancient species of elk grazed in valleys. Even the terrifying cave lions, while predators themselves, occasionally fell victim to human cooperation and sheer, desperate bravery. Today's target? A mature wild ox, its curved horns like scythes, its bulk promising not just meat, but hide, bone, sinew, materials that meant survival beyond the meal. But hunting such a beast was dangerous, every approach laced with risk. One wrong step, one poorly thrown spear, and the hunter became the hunted. The strategy was simple in theory: track the herd, anticipate their path, and drive the chosen animal toward a natural obstacle, a ravine, a thicket of dense brush, even a concealed pit if the group had time to prepare one in advance. Then came the signal, a subtle hand gesture, a low whistle carried by the wind, the positioning of bodies hidden in the undergrowth. The group fanned out. Some concealed themselves behind boulders and sparse trees. Others crouched in shallow depressions, barely breathing as the herd ambled closer. The ox's heavy hooves sank into the soft earth, its nostrils flaring, the faintest hint of uncertainty visible in its dark eyes. Animals sensed human presence, perhaps the subtle shift in wind, the muffled rustle of grass, the almost imperceptible scent of fear or determination in the air. Then, chaos erupted, a chorus of shouts, sharp cracks of thrown stones, the whoosh of wooden spears slicing through space. The hunters surged forward. The ox bolted, its muscles rippling beneath its thick hide, eyes wide with alarm. But the team was prepared. Two younger hunters sprinted from opposite directions, their footsteps sure, their timing precise, driving the animal toward the ravine's edge. It stumbled, momentarily confused, and in that brief hesitation a spear connected, thudding into the muscle near its shoulder. Not a fatal blow, but enough to slow it down. Another spear followed, striking with a crunch that echoed through the valley. Blood darkened its thick fur, its powerful frame faltering as exhaustion replaced adrenaline. Within minutes, the great beast collapsed, its breath ragged, its strength waning under the coordinated assault. Victory was never guaranteed, but today, skill and luck favored the group. But the hunt wasn't over yet. Not truly. Even as they gathered around the fallen ox, knives drawn, the team remained alert. Scavengers, wolves, hyenas, even rival human groups, often lurked nearby, waiting for an opportunity to steal the prize. The atmosphere buzzed with cautious celebration and wary vigilance. Butchering began immediately, efficient and methodical. Knives of flint and chert sliced through hide. Tendons snapped under careful pressure. Marrow-rich bones cracked open with heavy stone hammers. Every part of the animal served a purpose. The meat, rich and fatty, would be smoked over fires, preserved for leaner times. Hides transformed into clothing or makeshift shelters. Bones carved into tools or weapon points. Even tendons and sinew were valued, twisted into cords or binding materials. There was no waste. Every sliver of flesh, every scrap of hide, every sharp-edged fragment of bone had utility. Survival wasn't a glamorous affair. It was built on resourcefulness, cooperation, and the unwavering understanding that today's success could mean the difference between life and death tomorrow. While the primary hunting team focused on processing the animal, others prepared for transport. Skins bundled into makeshift sacks carried valuable meat. Heavy poles lashed together with sinew created stretchers for hauling larger portions back to camp. It was grueling, back-breaking labor, but failure to bring the prize home intact wasn't an option. Children, too young for the hunt but old enough to contribute, met the returning team with wide eyes and eager hands, helping carry smaller bundles or collecting scattered equipment. Elders offered guidance, showing younger members how to inspect the meat for signs of spoilage, or how to properly clean tools dulled during the hunt. But even after a successful hunt, hunger never truly vanished. Meals were carefully rationed, smoking fires maintained around the clock to preserve excess meat. Bones simmered to extract every last drop of nourishing marrow. The triumphant return of hunters brought temporary relief, but the specter of scarcity always lingered at the edges of every fire-lit gathering. As evening approached, with bellies slightly fuller and spirits momentarily lifted, the group circled the central fire once more. Stories of the hunt wove through the smoke, the narrow escape, the near miss, the collective pride in the successful takedown. Younger children mimicked the day's events, brandishing sticks as imaginary spears, their faces painted with awe and aspiration. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows against the walls of nearby shelters. The aroma of roasting meat mingled with the earthy scent of damp hides and freshly gathered herbs. Despite the ever-present hardships, tonight was a small victory, a reminder of humanity's stubbornness, cooperation, and the relentless will to survive. Yet as the stars emerged overhead and the cold crept in once more, preparations for the next day quietly began. Tools were inspected, embers shielded from the wind, and whispered plans for future foraging or hunting trickled through the group like embers drifting into the sky. The prehistoric day wasn't done. It merely paused. And the intricate dance of survival, learning, and community would begin again with the next sunrise. As the dawn of the next day approached and the embers of the communal fire pulsed softly under the careful eye of the night watchers, another group within the prehistoric community prepared for a task just as essential as hunting, but one that often went unnoticed in the grand stories of survival. Foraging, often overshadowed by the thrill of the hunt, was the steady heartbeat that kept the group nourished when large prey remained elusive. The foragers were a mix of individuals, mature adults with decades of environmental knowledge, sharp-eyed youths too young for high-risk hunts, and elder members whose wisdom compensated for their reduced mobility. Contrary to popular depictions of early human life revolving entirely around the chase of colossal beasts, most meals originated from the quiet, patient practice of foraging. Today, the group moved with practiced precision through the rolling hills and dense undergrowth of the region. Their steps were deliberate, their senses attuned to every whisper of the wind and rustle of leaves. The terrain dictated the day's potential bounty, a vast landscape where familiarity with every tree, stream, and patch of edible growth meant the difference between sustenance and starvation. The season was mid-autumn, a time when the land offered a fleeting abundance. Bright orange berries clung to thorny bushes, their tart flesh a reliable source of vitamins. Ground-level shrubs disguised edible roots beneath their tangled branches, while overhead, nut-bearing trees rattled softly in the breeze, their hard-shelled treasures nestled among fallen leaves. Foragers learned early that nature was a deceptive provider. Not all that glittered under the sun was edible. The group's matriarch, a weathered woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes as sharp as flint, demonstrated this truth with each step. She paused at a cluster of lush, glossy leaves sprouting tiny red fruits, her expression cautionary. "Poison," she muttered under her breath, crushing a leaf between her fingers and exposing the faint milky sap, a telltale sign of danger. The younger members observed, committing each plant's shape, color, and placement to memory. Knowledge in this world wasn't written down. It was spoken, demonstrated, etched into the fabric of daily life. A mistake meant illness, or worse. As the group moved deeper into the terrain, their baskets of woven reeds and animal sinew began to fill. Fat, protein-rich nuts clattered softly inside, alongside bundles of fibrous greens and clusters of tubers pulled from the soil with careful digging sticks. High in the trees, a few nimble climbers retrieved honeycombs, battling buzzing swarms for the golden, sticky reward. The sweet, energy-dense honey was more than a delicacy. It was liquid fuel for the harsh days ahead. But foraging wasn't solely about plants. Along shaded creek beds, the group scanned for amphibians and small reptiles, a ready source of protein requiring minimal effort compared to the risks of a large-scale hunt. Frogs, lizards, and even the occasional sluggish fish found their way into collection baskets, their presence promising variety for the evening meal. Insects, too, featured prominently in the foragers' diet. Beneath damp logs and inside hollowed stumps, beetles, larvae, and plump grubs squirmed. Though unappealing by modern standards, they were dense with essential nutrients and calories. Their harvest required quick hands and resilience against revulsion, a skill acquired over time, especially by the youngest group members eager to prove their usefulness. Throughout the morning, the group's rhythm was punctuated by soft chatter and quiet laughter. Even in a life shadowed by uncertainty, human connections thrived. Shared discoveries, teasing remarks, whispered warnings, the social fabric of the foragers remained tightly woven. In moments like these, survival transcended mere sustenance. It became about belonging. Yet danger lurked behind even the most routine tasks. Midway through their foraging expedition, the group encountered evidence of recent animal activity. Large paw prints pressed into the muddy banks of a stream, their edges crisp, indicating a predator's proximity. The older foragers exchanged glances, their expressions instantly serious. Quickly, they adjusted their route, veering away from the water's edge and toward denser thickets. In these moments, their collective knowledge of the land became their shield. They knew where the brush thickened enough to obscure their scent, where animal paths intersected with safe passageways, and where abandoned burrows could provide temporary concealment if needed. Their caution proved wise. Moments later, the faint, unmistakable growl of a territorial feline echoed from the distance. A wildcat, or perhaps a juvenile saber-tooth, prowling the undergrowth in search of an easy meal. The group paused, hearts racing, breath shallow, ears straining for confirmation that the predator had moved on. Silence returned, but the atmosphere remained tense. Foraging resumed, but with heightened awareness, each rustle scrutinized, every shadow regarded with suspicion. Such was the reality of life before civilization's barriers, nature's beauty interwoven with lethal unpredictability. By midday, their baskets brimmed with gathered resources. Edible fungi plucked from the forest floor, medicinal herbs known for easing infections or fevers, and vibrant aromatic leaves destined for flavoring otherwise bland stews. One young forager discovered a patch of wild onions, their pungent scent promising a rare burst of flavor for the evening's meal. Her find earned nods of approval and a quiet sense of pride. Firewood, too, was gathered as they moved. Dry branches, brittle twigs, and clusters of flammable moss were stockpiled. Fuel remained a constant necessity, not merely for cooking, but for warmth, protection, and the vital role it played in processing hides and crafting tools. Children scampered nearby under watchful eyes, learning which plants nourished and which could paralyze. The teaching never paused. A careless moment could lead to accidental poisoning or exposure to venomous creatures concealed beneath the underbrush. Their play mirrored survival skills, pretend hunts with sticks, mock foraging with pebbles, imitating elders' movements with earnest clumsiness. As the sun crept higher, the group began their return, following familiar trails etched into the landscape by countless journeys before. Their path wove through ancient trees whose roots twisted above ground like the bones of the earth, across sunlit clearings where birds wheeled overhead, and past weathered stones marked with the carvings of generations long gone. Their arrival at camp was met with muted celebration. The hunting party, though successful the previous day, knew that meat alone couldn't sustain them indefinitely. The gathered nuts, greens, roots, and proteins from the foragers' efforts balanced the group's diet, ensuring resilience against illness and fatigue. Preparation for the evening meal commenced, a communal effort as hides were cleaned, tools sharpened, fires stoked, and food divided. Cooking wasn't a luxury. It was science and survival blended into one. Stones heated in fire pits boiled water for stews. Sharpened sticks served as makeshift skewers. Leaves wrapped around roots and tubers steamed them to palatable softness. As dusk approached, the aroma of roasting meat, earthy stews, and fragrant herbs filled the air. The group gathered, their bellies growling, their spirits lifted by the promise of a shared meal and the warmth of community. Foraging, often overshadowed by tales of hunters and warriors, revealed its true value in moments like these. The quiet persistence of those who scoured the land, their eyes trained to spot nourishment where others saw only weeds or shadows, ensured the group's continued existence. The day wound down, but the cycle of survival pressed on. Tomorrow promised new challenges: unpredictable weather, elusive prey, territorial predators, and the unending need to adapt. Yet beneath the flickering light of the fire, with stories shared and food passed from hand to hand, hope quietly simmered. As twilight wrapped itself around the encampment and the final rays of sunlight faded behind distant hills, the camp's most critical asset took center stage: the fire. More than a simple source of warmth, fire was the very heartbeat of prehistoric life, a flickering boundary between safety and vulnerability. To the untrained eye, it was merely burning wood, but to those who lived under the open sky with predators lurking and cold winds cutting through crude shelters, it was nothing short of sacred. The role of tending the fire wasn't glamorous. You didn't gain prestige by keeping flames alive. But when the embers dimmed and the bitter chill crept in, or when the ominous glow of eyes reflected just beyond the camp's edge, the value of a steady flame became undeniable. Fire was protection, nourishment, and the difference between surviving the night or becoming part of the ecosystem in a more permanent way. In today's camp, the role of firekeeper fell to a lanky, quiet man with soot-darkened hands and sharp eyes that never strayed far from the glowing pit. His name was Kalen, known less for hunting prowess and more for his ability to coax sparks from damp kindling with patient determination. Some teased him for his solitary focus, but when temperatures dropped below freezing or when a predator's cry echoed in the distance, no one questioned his importance. Firekeeping began long before the sun vanished entirely. As evening approached, Kaloon and a few helpers, young teens eager to avoid less desirable chores, collected fuel: dry branches, clumps of moss, hardened animal dung, anything combustible. The search extended beyond camp borders, sometimes into shadowy thickets where predators prowled. But the risk was accepted. Without fuel, the fire died. And when the fire died, the group's odds of surviving the night plummeted. Starting fire from scratch was no simple feat. Kaloon carried with him the tools of the trade: a curved piece of hardwood and a straight spindle, wrapped with sinew for grip, alongside a carefully guarded pouch of dry, fibrous tinder, scraps of bark, shaved wood curls, even hair or feathers collected from previous hunts. The process demanded both skill and endurance, hands working rhythmically as the spindle spun into the hearthboard, friction building heat until smoke curled upward, followed by a faint, glowing ember nestled in the tinder. If conditions were ideal, dry air, still winds, it might take minutes. But more often than not, rain-soaked wood, damp earth, and gusting winds conspired against success, turning fire starting into a grueling ordeal of aching muscles and frayed patience. For this reason, the group rarely let the fire die completely. A small core of glowing coals was shielded under ashes, protected like treasure. Even when traveling between campsites, someone, often Kaloon, was tasked with transporting embers wrapped in moss or bark, secured within hollowed animal horns or woven baskets designed to insulate against the cold. Tonight the fire crackled and popped as flames licked upward, casting warm amber light across the gathered group. Its glow illuminated faces weathered by sun and wind, the fur and hide garments worn to shreds, and the tools and weapons piled nearby, ready for use if needed. But it also revealed comfort, a communal center where stories unfolded, food cooked, and fears for a few hours were softened by the dancing light. Around the fire, meals transformed from raw sustenance to something resembling enjoyment. Tubers roasted in the coals until their tough skins blackened and split, revealing tender, steaming insides. Small birds plucked of feathers crackled as their meat browned over flickering flames. Insects roasted crisp, became palatable, their crunch dulled by hunger and the smoky flavor clinging to every bite. Callan remained vigilant, adding fuel, adjusting stones to direct heat, and ensuring the flames neither sputtered out nor raged beyond control. His task may have lacked glamour, but when the group huddled closer, basking in warmth and light, they owed their comfort, and often their survival, to his expertise. Fire was also a tool for crafting. Animal hides, stretched taut between wooden frames, dried and cured beside the flames, becoming garments, shelter walls, and bedding. Bones heated and softened, allowing them to be shaped into needles, hooks, or decorative items. Even weapons benefited, hardened spear points or reinforced wooden shafts born from the precise dance of flame and skillful hands. But fire's role extended beyond survival and utility. It became a cultural anchor. Around it, stories passed between generations, tales of ancestors, of hunts gone awry or victorious, of strange spirits seen dancing on moonlit ridges. Superstitions clung to the firelight. It was believed to repel not only beasts, but also unseen forces, the whispering shadows that prowled beyond human understanding. Tonight's storytelling began with the eldest member of the group, a broad-shouldered man with a voice like gravel and deep lines etched across his face. He recounted the saga of a long-ago winter when snow buried the earth, and only the clever use of fire and foraged roots allowed his people to survive the endless cold. His words painted vivid images: frost clinging to eyelashes, smoke rising from snow shelters, and the gnawing hunger that stalked them like wolves. The children listened wide-eyed, their faces flickering with reflected firelight. Even the adults leaned in, despite having heard the story countless times. Around the fire, tradition lived, memory thrived, and survival knowledge passed seamlessly from elder to youth. Laughter bubbled up as the story wove toward its exaggerated, humorous conclusion of how one unlucky hunter mistook a frozen log for prey, only to tumble headfirst into a snowbank, his cries muffled by embarrassment and icy powder. The group chuckled, tension easing, their shoulders relaxing as the night deepened. Occasionally, music accompanied the storytelling. A young woman, seated cross-legged near the flames, produced a hollowed bone flute, its surface etched with simple carvings. She blew gently, producing haunting notes that rose and fell like the wind through the trees. Others joined in with rhythmic clapping, the occasional strike of stone against stone, creating a raw but captivating melody that wove itself into the night's atmosphere. Amidst the flickering shadows and the communal hum of voices and song, subtle courtships blossomed. Glances lingered longer than necessary. Food shared quietly between individuals hinted at growing affections. In this world of constant movement and uncertainty, forming bonds wasn't just emotional, it was practical. A reliable companion meant shared workloads, mutual protection, and comfort against the biting cold or prowling predators. Romance wasn't expressed with grand gestures or flowery words, but through small, deliberate acts, helping repair a shelter wall, sharing the choicest cut of meat, offering an extra hide during the coldest hours of the night. These simple exchanges built connections, fostering unity within the harsh rhythm of survival. As the fire's flames ebbed, reduced to glowing embers, the group drifted toward their shelters, crude but effective constructions of intertwined branches, animal hides, and earth-packed walls. The firekeeper remained behind, ensuring the embers were banked properly, insulated beneath ash to preserve heat until morning. Kalen's task never truly ended. His eyes scanned the horizon, the faint outlines of the landscape barely visible under the pale starlight. Even as sleep settled over the camp, he remained alert. A quiet guardian of flame and life, knowing that when morning returned, the cycle of struggle, triumph, and resilience would begin anew. As the fire settled into a quiet glow and the first stars claimed their positions in the ink-black sky, the prehistoric group retreated into their shelters. Structures that, while crude by modern standards, represented the remarkable human ability to adapt, construct, and protect. Contrary to the stereotype of early humans dwelling exclusively in caves, Reality painted a far more diverse and inventive picture. Caves were valuable, no doubt, natural fortresses against weather, predators, and wandering rivals, but they weren't always accessible. Competitors, whether other groups of humans or dangerous wildlife, often claimed prime locations long before newcomers arrived. The solution? Build your own refuge. Tonight's encampment rested on a windswept plateau bordered by sparse forests and uneven terrain. No caves, no ready-made shelters. Only what the land provided and what human determination could assemble. Their homes varied in complexity, shaped by available materials and the urgency of the environment. Some families constructed semi-permanent huts, frameworks of sturdy branches interwoven with flexible saplings, lashed together with strips of animal sinew or braided vines. These skeletons of wood formed domes or lean-tos, covered meticulously with layers of animal hides, woven grasses, and mud for insulation. Others opted for simpler solutions, windbreaks of stacked stones or earth, complemented by overlapping hides, offering minimal but essential protection from the elements. Shelter construction wasn't a matter of aesthetics. It was pure functionality driven by necessity and weather. Building these homes demanded teamwork. Children fetched sticks and manageable materials. Adolescents carried heavier branches or rocks. Adults lashed, tied, and layered the structures with practiced hands. There were no blueprints, only inherited knowledge, the understanding passed down through generations about which materials bent without breaking, which knots held firm, and how to angle walls to deflect wind or shed rain. The centerpiece of many shelters was the communal space, a fire pit encircled by rocks, its smoke vented through an opening at the top of the structure. Walls, though imperfect, were patched with overlapping hides or clumps of dried grass, each addition improving insulation and stability. Tonight, as the group settled within these shelters, the muted murmur of conversation filled the darkness. Infants fussed softly, soothed by the rhythmic hum of mothers or older siblings. Elders tucked furs around their joints, weathered fingers tracing the seams of patched hides for cold leaks. The ground, though covered in layered vegetation or animal skins, remained unforgiving, hard-packed earth resistant to comfort. But compared to the biting winds outside or the ever-present threat of predators, these humble homes provided immense relief. Within one of the larger structures, an expectant mother lay surrounded by companions, her rounded belly signaling the group's next addition to their fragile community. Childbirth in the prehistoric world was both miracle and gamble. With no medical interventions, no sterile tools, survival hinged on collective care, experience, and luck. Women within the group acted as midwives, not by formal title, but by accumulated knowledge. They recognized the signs of labor, the rhythms of breathing, the dangers of complications. They coached, comforted, and prepared herbs believed to ease pain or promote healing. Outside, others maintained vigilance. Predators, particularly drawn by the scent of vulnerability or the cries of newborns, circled camps under the cover of darkness. Spears rested by doorways. Fire embers were stirred, stones ready for throwing stacked within easy reach. Despite the looming dangers, life persisted. The infant's arrival, accompanied by strained cries and relieved laughter, marked not only a new beginning but also a triumph over nature's harsh odds. The newborn's fragile wails soon joined the nocturnal symphony of crackling fires, howling winds, and distant animal calls. Parenthood within these shelters transcended biological responsibility. It became a group endeavor. Infants were swaddled in softened hides, insulated with dried grass or woven fibers. Elders, unable to contribute physically to hunts or foraging, assisted with childcare, their wisdom ensuring the next generation absorbed vital lessons early. As the night deepened, the shelters quieted. Outside, shadows shifted. Small predators sniffed cautiously at the camp's perimeter, discouraged by the lingering firelight and the faint human scent marking the ground. Wind tugged at loose hides. Rain threatened to breach imperfect seams. Yet the group remained tucked within their makeshift homes, breathing in unison, their warmth shared beneath layers of fur and faith in their construction. These shelters weren't perfect, Roofs leaked, walls sagged under storms, smoke occasionally suffocated occupants when ventilation failed, but they symbolized defiance against the elements, an assertion that fragile humans could carve out havens amid untamed wilderness. Adaptability shone brightest here. In summer, light shelters could be disassembled and relocated within hours, following migrating herds or shifting seasons. In winter, structures thickened with layers of additional hides, reinforced walls bracing against snowdrifts and bitter gales. Over time, small innovations emerged. Bone needles stitched tighter seams, woven mats covered muddy floors, portable windbreaks allowed for adjustable living spaces. Each generation refined the designs, improving upon the blueprints etched in collective memory. The shelters weren't mere structures, they were symbols of cooperation, resilience, and the evolutionary drive to claim a fragile corner of safety in a world that offered little mercy. As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon and smoke curled lazily from smoldering fires, the group stirred within their homes, ready once more to face the daily challenges of survival, bolstered by the walls they had built together. As dawn crept cautiously across the jagged skyline, washing the land in soft gray light, the prehistoric camp began to stir with slow, deliberate movements. But while adults rose with the weight of responsibility, etched into every muscle, the youngest members of the group, their faces still unweathered by time, awoke to a different reality. Childhood, even in this harsh and unpredictable world, existed. It looked nothing like the padded, sheltered years modern society grants, but it carried its own form of wonder, learning, and critical importance. In the camp, children were everywhere, some toddling unsteadily over uneven ground, others trailing behind older siblings with wide, curious eyes, and a few already resembling miniature versions of seasoned hunters or gatherers, their days of carefree exploration nearing an end. Here, childhood was brief, precious, and incredibly dangerous. From the moment a child could walk, they began absorbing knowledge not through lectures or formal lessons, but through constant observation and participation. The camp itself was the classroom. The elders, the teachers, and the harsh wilderness served as both playground and peril. There were no toys carved from plastic, no colorful distractions powered by batteries. Nature provided everything. Sticks, stones, feathers, bones, insects, leaves, all transformed into props for imitation games that taught survival instinctively. Early on, toddlers learned boundaries in the most direct ways possible. Step too close to the fire, and the searing heat became a painful teacher. Wander beyond the camp's edge, and sharp words or firm grips reminded them of unseen dangers. The cliffs beyond the plateau, the thickets hiding predators, even certain plants whispered lessons in risk, often with immediate and unforgettable consequences. Discipline was practical, sharp, and unwavering. There were no timeouts or long-winded explanations. A reckless child teetering near the edge of danger was snatched back with firm hands, accompanied by short guttural warnings, no fall, or fire burns. In this world, hesitation could be fatal, and learning fast wasn't optional. It was the difference between life and oblivion. Yet amidst the discipline, play flourished. Children mimicked their elders with fierce determination. They practiced throwing pebbles at imaginary prey, crept through the grass pretending to stalk animals, and formed loose bands to explore the immediate surroundings. These games served a purpose. Every thrown rock refined motor skills, every climbing adventure honed agility, every playful scuffle taught resilience and social hierarchy. The group recognized that behind the child's laughter and curious exploration lay the seeds of future hunters, foragers, protectors, and firekeepers. The strongest hunters had once been stumbling toddlers tripping over roots. The wisest elders had once chased insects through the tall grass. Childhood, brief as it was, built the foundation for everything to come. Infants remained swaddled in softened hides, their small forms nestled close to their mothers or older caregivers. Feeding, soothing, and protection were constant. Breastfeeding continued for years, a necessity in an environment where alternative nourishment for the young was scarce and often unreliable. Weaning was gradual, supplemented by chewed meat or mashed plants shared from adult hands. sometimes pre-softened by teeth before reaching a child's mouth. Hygiene for the young was pragmatic. There were no diapers, no antiseptic creams. Children relieved themselves freely, their messes cleaned with leaves, moss, or simply left to the elements, much like animals in the wild. Illness was an ever-present threat. The group relied on experience, herbs, and the innate strength of the human body to overcome infections, fevers, or injuries. Not all survived, but those who did carried with them an immune system hardened by exposure to the unforgiving world. Education wasn't structured, it was relentless and immersive. Children learned the names of edible plants by watching the foragers, shadowed the hunters as they tracked prey, absorbed the sounds and movements that signaled danger or opportunity. Stories told around the fire embedded lessons of caution, courage, and cunning, their exaggerated adventures disguising real survival wisdom. Role models came in many forms. The group's skilled tracker, a quiet figure known for reading the land with uncanny precision, often found himself followed by wide-eyed youngsters eager to understand how a bent blade of grass or disturbed patch of soil revealed an animal's recent passage. The group's most accomplished gatherer, a sharp-tongued woman whose knowledge of medicinal plants surpassed anyone else's, became an unofficial mentor, her every movement shadowed by eager apprentices in training. Children were expected to contribute from a young age. By 6 or 7, many carried small tools, fetched water, collected firewood, or kept watch over drying hides and stored food. They learned to scrape animal skins, sharpen basic tools, and distinguish safe pathways from treacherous ones. Their value to the group increased with every skill mastered. Their survival and integration depended on how swiftly they transformed from helpless dependents to semi-functional contributors. Friendships and rivalries emerged organically, bonds forged over shared explorations, playful competitions, and the occasional scraped knee or bruised ego. Arguments were resolved quickly, often through roughhousing or intervention from adults. Their lessons in cooperation necessary for a future where unity meant collective strength. Among the young, ambitions flickered, not in the abstract dreams of modern careers, but in the pursuit of proving one's worth. The child who learned to weave the tightest baskets, who discovered the sweetest berries, who accurately threw their first makeshift spear. These small victories planted pride and established reputation within the group. The harshest reality, however, loomed constantly. Life was fragile, especially for the youngest. Disease, injury, animal attacks. Any could snatch a child from the group with little warning. Graves were shallow. Memories etched not in stone markers but in stories whispered around fires. Names carried forward by siblings, cousins, and the elders. But each surviving child, with dirt under their fingernails and wild determination in their eyes, represented the future. The group's hope for continuity, for improved knowledge, for pushing the fragile boundaries of human endurance one generation further. As the camp once again bustled with activity, hunters departing, foragers preparing, firekeepers coaxing flames, children weaved through the crowd, their lessons ongoing, their place within the ancient human tapestry gradually solidifying. Their journey was only beginning, their roles unwritten but vital, their path carved by instinct, survival, and the unwavering mentorship of those who had come before. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain, the prehistoric camp transformed, not just into a place of survival, but a living, breathing community, rich with interaction, unspoken rules, subtle alliances, and the raw beginnings of human social structure. Life wasn't solely about the hunt, the shelter, or gathering food. Beneath the surface of daily struggles, a more intricate web of relationships wove the group together. These bonds, built through cooperation, shared hardship, and subtle competition, formed the foundation of their society. In this camp, numbers fluctuated between 25 and 50 individuals. The size of the group carefully balanced between safety in numbers and the need to remain mobile, lean, and capable of sustaining themselves with limited resources. Within that fragile population, everyone's role, spoken or unspoken, was shaped by skill, age, reputation, and social awareness. The most respected individuals weren't necessarily the strongest or most aggressive. Instead, status came from contribution. The hunter who consistently brought back game, the tracker who read the earth with uncanny precision, the gatherer who could find edible plants in barren seasons. These individuals carried quiet influence. Their opinions mattered around the fire, their guidance sought when planning movements, their actions imitated by the younger generation. But with status came tension. Competition for influence simmered just beneath the surface. Two hunters, both skilled and ambitious, might clash. Not with fists, but through subtle displays. The sharpest spear crafted, the boldest scouting mission undertaken, the quiet spreading of stories highlighting personal triumphs. Social maneuvering was as much a survival tool as a well-thrown spear. Despite these rivalries, cooperation remained essential. Isolated individuals rarely survived. Even the most skilled hunter relied on others for tool repair, wound treatment, food preparation, and, crucially, protection during sleep. Lone wolves existed, but their lives were often short and brutal, shadows drifting at the edges of established groups, their survival hanging by a thread. Friendship and companionship thrived amid these harsh realities. Shared experiences, weathering storms, surviving close encounters with predators, enduring failed hunts, welded bonds that transcended mere survival. Around the fire, laughter echoed, fueled by exaggerated retellings of misadventures and the age-old human tradition of transforming failure into humor. Romance, too, unfolded within the subtle dance of prehistoric life. There were no declarations with flowers or love songs sung beneath moonlight. Instead, relationships blossomed through effort and quiet gestures, helping patch a drafty shelter wall, sharing the choicest cuts of meat, assisting with tool maintenance after a long day. Proximity played its part. With a small group and constant movement, options were limited. Romantic connections often grew out of long familiarity. Childhood playmates evolving into hunting partners, foraging companions becoming life mates. Pair bonds, while not governed by modern concepts of marriage, often lasted years, held together by mutual reliance and the shared raising of children. Yet relationships weren't permanent or rigid. Human mobility, the ever-present danger, and resource scarcity meant flexibility was necessary. Sometimes partnerships dissolved quietly, affection replaced by distance, responsibilities divided differently. Jealousy existed, but survival needs often overpowered possessive instincts. Community stability outweighed personal disputes. Among the elders, those with silver-threaded hair and faces lined by wind and sun, storytelling held revered status. Their knowledge, stored not in written words but etched into memory, flowed freely around the evening fire. They spoke of migrations, when distant mountains still spat smoke and molten rock into the sky. They recalled the arrival of towering animals now vanished, their massive bones scavenged for tools and shelter. These stories weren't entertainment alone, they were survival manuals encoded in myth and metaphor. Lessons on edible plants hid within tales of foolish wanderers, instructions for avoiding predators disguised as ghostly legends of vanished hunters, maps of the landscape layered into exaggerated heroic journeys. Music wove through the fabric of social life, primitive yet deeply human. Rhythmic clapping, hollow bones producing haunting melodies, the steady tap of stones shaping a beat. These sounds rose during shared meals, after successful hunts, or in quiet evenings when the stars burned cold above. Children danced, mimicking animal movements. Adults joined with stomping feet, their bodies swaying with the rhythm of survival itself. These gatherings didn't erase hardship, but they soothed the raw edges of existence, reinforcing unity beneath the omnipresent uncertainty. Conflict, inevitable in human groups, erupted from time to time. Disputes over resources, food, tools, sleeping space, flared, sometimes escalating into brief physical confrontations, often settled with displays of dominance rather than prolonged violence. The group's cohesion mattered more than pride, and elders or respected individuals often intervened, diffusing tensions with stern words or practical redistribution of resources. Exile, though rare, was the ultimate punishment. To be cast out, banished into the vast predator-filled wilderness, was a sentence few survived. Thus, most disputes found resolution, grudgingly or otherwise, under the shared understanding that unity was non-negotiable. Social gatherings served more than entertainment. They reinforced identity. The group shared common markings, lines etched into tools, painted symbols on hides, adornments of bone, feather, or carved wood. These tokens, subtle yet significant, distinguished them from rival groups, signaling belonging in a world where the unfamiliar could mean danger. Occasionally, groups encountered others, nomadic bands migrating along intersecting routes, strangers appearing on the fringes of hunting grounds. These meetings teetered between opportunity and threat. Trade occurred, knowledge exchanged, sometimes alliances formed. But suspicion lingered. Resources were finite, and desperation could twist strangers into competitors. Despite uncertainty, humans instinctively sought connection, even beyond immediate kin. Outsiders were scrutinized, their intentions gauged, their skills observed. Those proving valuable, skilled trackers, knowledgeable foragers, adept toolmakers, might be welcomed cautiously, integrated into the fragile social web. The camp's social fabric was ever-changing, a dynamic blend of cooperation, quiet rivalries, shared hardships, and primal traditions. Beneath the dust, the smoke, and the echoing calls of predators, these relationships bound the group together, carrying them, uncertain yet unbroken, across the untamed wilderness. As dusk descended, casting long golden streaks across the jagged landscape, the prehistoric group's day of survival gradually gave way to something more profound, a quieter, almost mystical side of life that revealed an unexpected truth. Long before civilizations rose and languages were carved into stone, humans were creators. They were artists, visionaries, and storytellers, leaving behind marks of their existence far beyond spears and fire. It's easy to imagine these ancient people as focused solely on hunting, gathering, and building shelter, but evidence hidden deep within caves, across windswept cliffs, and etched onto fragments of bone reveals otherwise. They created art, vivid, symbolic, and often strikingly sophisticated expressions of their world, their fears, their hopes, and their identity. Tonight, after the campfire's embers had settled and the younger members drifted into sleep, a small group prepared for a different kind of task, one not driven by hunger or immediate survival. Carrying torches made from tightly bound reeds soaked in resin, they ventured toward a nearby cavern, their hidden gallery, a place of history, reverence, and human imagination. The entrance yawned wide beneath an overhang of rock, partially concealed by thorny bushes and jagged stones, as though nature herself guarded the secrets within. Yet the group's practiced hands cleared the way, their torchlight pushing back the dense darkness of the cavern's depths. Inside, the air was cool, heavy with the scent of earth and ancient minerals. Shadows danced along the walls as flickering flames illuminated the space. Upon those cold stone walls, countless generations had left their mark. Paintings, carvings etched outlines of creatures both real and imagined. Enormous beasts leapt across the rock in ochre reds, deep blacks, and chalky whites. Stag-like creatures with sprawling antlers, shaggy mammals resembling modern bison, spiraling symbols whose meanings remained a mystery to modern eyes. The tools for these creations were as raw as the world itself. Crushed minerals, iron oxides, charcoal, manganese, mixed with animal fats, water, or even saliva to form primitive yet enduring pigments. Brushes crafted from chewed reeds, feathers, or animal fur applied the colors with surprising precision. Hollow bones transformed into crude airbrushes, spraying pigment over outstretched hands to leave stark silhouettes upon the stone. But these weren't idle decorations. Each stroke, each layered image served a deeper purpose. Ritual, storytelling, perhaps attempts to influence the unpredictable forces of nature itself. Some anthropologists suggest the cave art reflected spiritual beliefs, early connections to the unknown realms beyond life, or even complex hunting rituals intended to summon success. Others believe these spaces acted as communal memory banks, the walls bearing visual maps of the land, reminders of where prey migrated, where dangerous cliffs lay hidden, or where rival groups once clashed. Still others see them as the first human attempts at beauty, proof that even amid scarcity and danger, our ancestors carried the innate desire to create, to leave behind more than bones and ashes. In the flickering torchlight, one young woman, her hands stained with ochre, eyes wide with quiet pride, added her own contribution to the wall. She painted a sleek animal, its body elongated in motion, lines rippling to suggest speed and grace. Her companions watched, offering murmurs of approval as the creature took form. Though the group's knowledge of anatomy was based purely on observation, many of the drawings captured movement with striking accuracy. The way limbs bent during a chase, how fur bristled along a predator's spine, the curve of horns locked in battle. These weren't crude scribbles. They were deliberate, practiced depictions, passed down through generations of shared knowledge. Cave art wasn't limited to animals. Scattered among the images were symbols, geometric shapes, spirals, handprints, arrangements of dots and lines whose full meanings remain lost to time. Some researchers believe they marked significant events, tracked lunar cycles, or served as early language prototypes. Others suggest they reflected inner worlds, abstract expressions of dreams, fears, or the attempt to comprehend mortality. But beyond the caves, artistry flourished in other forms. Necklaces strung from shells, animal teeth, and polished stones adorned necks. Carved figurines, often depicting exaggerated human forms, were tucked into shelters or carried as talismans. Etched patterns decorated tools, transforming utilitarian objects into symbols of identity and status. One man in the group, older, his face mapped with creases of time, wore around his neck a polished stone, smooth from years of handling. He claimed it brought good fortune during hunts, though others teased him for his superstition. Regardless of belief, the stone was more than decoration. It was heritage, a marker of belonging. Music, too, echoed across the prehistoric world, simple yet stirring. Hollow bones fashioned into flutes produced haunting melodies that drifted through the camp. Animal hides stretched over wooden frames transformed into drums, their deep, resonating beats mimicking the rhythm of approaching thunder or the pounding of feet during hunts. Rhythmic clapping, stone tapping, even the human voice, singing low chants or playful refrains, wove into these soundscapes, turning quiet evenings into communal performances. It wasn't refined music by modern standards, but it carried emotion, unity, and echoes of the emerging human spirit. Around the fire, these creations, songs, carvings, paintings, connected the group. They were more than entertainment. They passed knowledge, comforted anxious minds, and reminded everyone that survival wasn't merely about enduring. It was about leaving a mark, however fleeting, upon the world. As the cavern session drew to a close, the group extinguished their torches, their art shimmering faintly in the residual light. Generations from now, others would stand in this same space, their fingers tracing the outlines of ancient animals, their hearts stirred by the distant echo of ancestors who dared to create amid chaos. The camp's artistic expressions were humble, raw, and weathered by time, but they revealed a truth etched into human DNA, the urge to transform hardship into beauty, to craft symbols of hope in a brutal, uncertain world. As the first light of dawn stretched over the jagged cliffs and rolling plains, the prehistoric group awoke to a familiar, relentless challenge: nature itself. The wild world beyond their modest camp offered no mercy, no second chances. Every movement, every decision, every tool sharpened the line between survival and catastrophe. But through observation, ingenuity, and stubborn trial and error, these early humans carved knowledge from the chaos. They had no written guides, no maps, no compasses. Their instruments were the senses honed by thousands of hours of watching the land breathe, tracking seasons and recognizing patterns woven into wind, water, and earth. The tracker of the group, a broad-shouldered, quiet figure named Relic, led the morning ritual of reading the ground. His eyes scanned the subtle disruptions in the soil, the bent grasses, the faintest imprints of claws or hooves. To the untrained eye, the terrain appeared undisturbed, But to Ralik, the earth told a detailed story. A herd of grazing animals passed here hours ago. Predators circled near the eastern ridge during the night. Recent rains had softened the ground, amplifying every footprint. His skill wasn't mystical. It was earned through relentless practice, mistakes endured, near misses with stalking predators, and quiet patience. The group depended on him, for in this vast wilderness, knowledge of the land wasn't just power, it was life. The sun's position, the cloud formations, the behavior of birds overhead, all became navigational tools. When storms brewed on the horizon, they read the wind's shift, its sudden cool breath signaling rain or worse. The clouds, tinged with shades of deep gray or blue, whispered of coming weather, dictating the day's plans. Water sources, essential but treacherous, required constant monitoring. Streams hidden in dense underbrush offered hydration, but they also attracted predators and competitors. Stagnant pools carried disease. Fast-moving currents risked sweeping the careless away. They learned to read the ripples, detect animal activity near watering holes, and assess safe access points. The group's understanding extended underground too. Digging for tubers and roots demanded careful identification. Some plants nourished, others poisoned. The sharp-tongued gatherer, Erin, carried this knowledge like a shield. Her warnings were blunt, her instructions repeated daily. Red stem, you'll bleed inside. Smooth leaves, safe stew, bitter aftertaste, spit and run. These lessons, passed orally from elders to youth, formed an unbroken chain of survival science. Mistakes were deadly, their memory etched into the group's collective caution. Seasonal migration patterns dictated movements. They understood when herds would shift, when berries ripened, when rivers flooded their banks. Their mobility wasn't chaotic, it was orchestrated by ancient understanding of ecological rhythms. The first buds of spring signaled a northward trek. The drying grasses of late summer pushed them closer to water sources. The scent of snow on the wind prompted shelter fortification. Their tools evolved from this environmental awareness. Spears weren't haphazardly assembled. They were crafted based on prey, terrain, and weather. Heavy stone points for larger animals, lighter flint tips for speed. Sinew bindings adjusted for flexibility or rigidity. Their materials sourced carefully from the remains of previous hunts. Even their clothing reflected this raw science. In colder regions, they layered hides meticulously, stitching them with sinew, lining the insides with fur, ensuring minimal heat loss. Animal fat smeared on exposed skin created insulation and insect deterrent. Foot coverings adapted to terrain, thick hide moccasins for rocky ground, softer wrappings for stealth in the forests. Fire, beyond warmth and cooking, became an experimental tool. They hardened spear tips in flame, observed how different woods burned, which fuels produced longer-lasting coals or less smoke. This knowledge wasn't instinctive. It was painstakingly gathered, tested, and passed down in whispered lessons and watchful demonstrations. The group's relationship with predators exemplified their evolving expertise. They didn't merely flee or confront, they observed. They knew how to recognize a stalking pattern, distinguish between a hunting wolf pack and a lone, desperate animal, estimate the territorial range of predators by the freshness of their tracks and the strength of their scent markings. Defensive strategies arose from this understanding. They positioned shelters strategically, used wind direction to mask scent, kept fires burning at vulnerable perimeter points, and trained younger members in silent alertness. Survival wasn't reactionary. It was proactive, a constant mental chess game with nature itself. Even illness was met with rudimentary scientific responses. They cataloged which herbs reduced fevers, which roots eased pain, and how specific clays absorbed toxins. Infections were treated with poultices of crushed plants, wounds cauterized with heated stones when necessary. Recovery was uncertain, but these practices increased odds and formed the foundation of prehistoric medicine. Observing animals revealed insights beyond hunting. They mimicked the nesting behaviors of birds to insulate shelters, followed foraging patterns of herbivores to locate edible plants, even learned from predators' stealth to improve their own ambush techniques. The natural world became their unspoken instructor, offering clues for those patient enough to decode them. Not all lessons came without cost. A misread weather sign meant flooded shelters. Mistaking edible mushrooms led to sickness or hallucinations. Underestimating animal aggression left scars, physical and emotional. But failure, as brutal as it was, refined their survival instincts. Through these relentless trials, the group developed an innate resilience, a symbiotic relationship with the land, forged in hardship but polished by observation and ingenuity. They didn't conquer nature. They adapted, blending knowledge, experimentation, and ancestral wisdom to navigate a world where uncertainty reigned. As evening fell, the group returned to their camp, their movements confident yet cautious. The knowledge etched into every step, every tool, every decision wasn't merely tradition. It was a raw, unrefined science, ensuring that, for one more day, they remained among the living. As the horizon bled into deep purples and inky blacks, the prehistoric group prepared to retreat from the vast wild world into the modest sanctuary of their camp. Another day survived, marked by lessons learned, close encounters avoided, and the persistent hum of existence in its rawest form. But before sleep claimed them, there was always time for reflection, for ritual, and for strengthening the invisible threads that held their fragile community together. The fire, coaxed back to life by steady hands, crackled at the heart of camp. Its flames licked upward, casting amber light on weathered faces, on hides patched and mended, on tools that had become as familiar as fingers. It wasn't just warmth or safety the fire provided. It was identity, a reminder that even in an unforgiving world, humans carved spaces of connection and meaning. Elders settled into their places near the blaze, children clustering at their feet, wide-eyed with curiosity. Tonight's storyteller was not one of the oldest, but a wiry, sharp-eyed woman named Thera. Her voice carried authority tempered with humor, weaving words as skillfully as others wove sinew or sharpened blades. Her story didn't begin with triumphant hunts or epic chases. It started with loss, a great storm that once scattered her people, forcing them to rebuild from nothing, to find food in barren lands, to face predators emboldened by human vulnerability. But it wasn't a tale of despair. Her words painted images of resilience, of fires reignited, of shelters rising from twisted branches, of knowledge rediscovered in the footprints of animals and the whisper of wind through stone. Around her, the group listened, not merely for entertainment, but for affirmation, that survival wasn't a linear path, that struggle was woven into human history, and that unity, above all, transformed hardship into endurance. Children clung to every word, their minds absorbing not just the plot but the deeper codes. How to recognize edible plants, how to avoid dangerous terrain, how to read the shifting moods of the land. The story's humor, moments of exaggerated blunders and unlikely heroes, earned chuckles, easing the lingering tension from a day lived on instinct. As the tale tapered into its closing lessons, music emerged, a steady rhythm tapped from stones, the faint hum of bone flutes breathing haunting melodies into the night. Voices joined, low chants rising with the fire's smoke, blending into a tapestry of sound that connected every soul present, binding them through ancient rituals older than memory itself. Even within these solemn moments, subtle social dances unfolded. A glance exchanged between two young adults promised quiet companionship. A shared bundle of roasted roots between neighbors reinforced alliances. The playful teasing of a child by a seasoned hunter hinted at mentorship in the making. Romance blossomed quietly. No grand declarations, only the small practical gestures that built bonds in a world too dangerous for careless emotion. Shared food, assistance with burdens, sitting shoulder to shoulder by the fire, all spoke louder than words. The night deepened and gradually individuals drifted to their shelters, layered hides and branches forming crude but precious sanctuaries. The fire burned low, carefully managed by those tasked with its guardianship, embers buried beneath ash, ready to spark anew at dawn. Above, the stars spread across the vast sky, glittering unfamiliar patterns for some, ancient guides for others. The moon's pale glow washed the land, illuminating distant cliffs, winding rivers, and the faint tracks of passing animals. But beneath that sky, Amid the simple structures and smoldering fires, humanity pulsed with stubborn, relentless spirit. They were not the most fearsome creatures on the land. They lacked claws, fangs, armored hides. Yet they endured, through knowledge, cooperation, creativity, and the unwavering belief that tomorrow, against all odds, they would rise again. Their legacy wasn't written in stone walls or towering cities, but in the traditions carried forward. The careful hand guiding a child through edible plants, the steady rhythm of tools honed by experience, the quiet pride of painted animals hidden in deep caves. They left their mark, not through domination, but through adaptation, proof that even in the most brutal environments, humans found not only survival, but meaning. And here we are, thousands of years later, looking back, not to marvel at our distant ancestors as primitive curiosities, but to recognize the roots of ourselves, the instinct to create, to connect, to endure. If this journey through the raw, untamed life of our prehistoric relatives sparked something within you, curiosity, admiration, maybe even a newfound respect, then you belong here, with us. Hit that subscribe button, because our community is all about diving deep, exploring the forgotten and connecting the dots of human history in ways textbooks never will. But I don't want this to be just my voice echoing in the digital wild. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Share your story, your reflections, your thoughts. What did you learn today? Did this glimpse into ancient life surprise you, inspire you, maybe even make you appreciate your cozy bed and hot shower a little more? Let's build this community together, a space where curiosity, history, and imagination collide. Because just like our ancestors, we're stronger when we share knowledge, when we listen, when we explore the unknown together. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Until next time, stay curious and stay human.